Watchers call. Whispers from the eternal void.
We found a child singing the litany of purity in hard vacuum for 13 hours. When she opened her mouth, every chronometer in a 3-kilometer radius slipped exactly 13 minutes behind fleet standard and stayed there. I am Commissar Helena Vex of the 47th Cadian Shock Regiment, embarked aboard the transport Throne's Mercy, seconded to Margos errant Rose 7 Silex for quarantine operations. The impossible precision of this temporal anomaly violates every principle of Imperial chronometry doctrine. Yet here we stand, witnesses to time itself genuflecting before a child's voice. Hive Liturga sprawls across Vespera Tertius like a prayer carved in iron and desperation. The pilgrim ark Sanctity of Thorns had crashed into the Hive's docking spindle 3 days prior, its hull split like a broken rosary, spilling refugees and cargo across 17 levels of HAB blocks. Standard quarantine protocols had been established. Standard protocols had failed within 6 hours. The environmental readings defied logic. Life support systems hummed their machine hymns without fault. Atmospheric processors maintained optimal efficiency, yet frost crawled over every surface in delicate lacework. Minus 50 degrees Celsius by cogitator readout. The cold bit through carapace armor like consecrated needles. Each exhale forming crystalline clouds that drifted upward against atmospheric logic. Glassy ash fell like snow throughout the spindle's corridors, rising from deck plates in defiance of gravity, swirling in patterns that made my eyes water. When Trooper Kess attempted to collect samples, the particles dissolved at his touch, leaving only the faint taste of burned incense and something sweeter. Something that reminded me of lullabies sung in languages I had never learned. Commissar, Sergeant Bren's voice crackled through vox static that formed geometric patterns on the comm display. Perimeter established around the anomaly. Hexagrammic wards deployed per ecclesiarchy protocol. His voice carried a tremor I had never heard from a Mordian transfer veteran. The candles, ma'am. They're burning wrong. I advanced through the main thoroughfare, my command squad maintaining tactical spacing. Corporal Thane carried the portable Vox unit, its machine spirit chattering in Binharic cant as it struggled to filter growing interference. The static whispered through Vox channels. Not electromagnetic disruption, but something softer. Nursery hymns, 3 notes repeated in endless variation, weaving through our communications like a parasite seeking warmth. We found her at the intersection of corridors, Gamma 7 and Theta 13, standing in the center of concentric hexagrammic candles. The flames should have burned straight and true, their blessed wax creating barriers no spawn of chaos could cross. Instead, each flame leaned toward her like flowers seeking sunlight, their light casting shadows that fell in wrong directions. She appeared perhaps 8 years old, dressed in rough pilgrim's robes, hair the color of ash and starlight. Her feet were bare against frost-covered deck plates, yet she showed no discomfort from the impossible cold. When she breathed, no mist formed, though the air around her shimmered with heat distortion. Approach with caution, I commanded, drawing my bolt pistol and speaking the litany of accuracy. The weapon's machine spirit responded sluggishly, its targeting array flickering between green and amber status indicators. Maintain perimeter integrity. No one crosses the ward line without authorization. The child looked up with eyes that reflected no light. Instead, they showed shifting geometric diagrams, triangles within triangles, inverting and uninverting, like a metronome of impossible shape. When I blinked, the patterns hung on my eyelids like branded ghosts. Margos Silex approached on spider legs of brass, mechadendrites sketching sigils in incense smoke. Anomaly registers as null life, Commissar, he grated through his vox grill. No organic signature, no heat signature. Pattern presents as voice. Personnel had been vanishing. 1 man per hour, precisely at the 13th minute. Sentries stepping out of step. Servitors losing their loops. Trooper Kessel went to check a sealed hatch at 15:13 and didn't return. Left only his boots, frost inside them like spun glass. The child stepped forward, bare feet leaving no prints in frost, and consecrated ward lines parted before her like curtains of light. Hexagrammic barriers, blessed by 3 confessors, sanctified with oils from sacred reliquaries, offered no impediment to her passage. She began to hum, 3 notes in perfect sequence, and the candle flames bent impossibly toward her small form. "Child," I called, voice flat with commissarial authority. "By order of the commissariat and holy ordos, hold position." She tilted her head, and the humming threaded through our protective litanies. Confessor Malchai's canticle against the unhallowed faltered as she mouthed the responses, adding unknown lines on every 13th verse. The frost around candle rims pulled inward, as if breathing, and triangular hazard glyphs on my tactical display inverted themselves, points down like warning teeth. "Where is your mother?" she asked, voice carrying the mess hall cadence soldiers use when pretending want. The temperature dropped another 10 degrees. My left glove numbed against the wardline chalk, which melted where my fingers touched, forming shapes like downward-pointing teeth. The ash above chimed like tiny bells as it drifted into upper lattice work. And somewhere in the distance, hive clocks rang 13 at 18:13. We tried every test. Malkai asperged the wardline, water froze mid-arc and slid backward into the font. Silex pinged her with auspex. The return showed only a hole you could fall into. Servo skull pick feeds recorded absence bordered by sparks, each spark a tiny triangle turning upside down between frames. At 18:13 hour, chronometers ticked to the wrong time and would not be corrected. The child smiled the way soldiers smile before a charge, because the charge is simple and life is not. Private Harvin approached, his face ashen, eyes too wide. He leaned close, voice barely audible above the growing harmonic interference. "Commissar," he whispered, holding up his vox speed. It clicked, hissed, held no sound at all. "She spoke your cognomen, ma'am. The one from Scholler training, the one only the commissariat keeps. His terror was genuine, raw. She said it like a lullaby, but nothing recorded. I did not move, did not breathe. The candles leaned nearer like small mouths ready to kiss. The 3 notes shivered the ash into bells, and the 13th minute approached again. The child smiled, knowing a name I had burned, and began to sing. Vex sealed the docking spindle with the precision of a field execution, her authorization code scratching across the cogitator slate in triangular patterns that corrected themselves as she watched. The blast doors cycled through their machine hymns, magalox, engaging with the sound of slam prayers, hydraulics whining compliance as adamantium barriers separated the sanctity of thorns from hive liturga's infected air. Glassy ash drifted upward in impossible spirals, falling like snow in reverse gravity, each particle catching lumen light and fracturing it into geometric warnings. Humidity condensed on weapon barrels despite environmental suits reading optimal seal integrity. Droplets marching toward muzzles as an impossible breeze pulled everything toward the humming source deeper in the ark's sacred chambers. Advance by bounds, Vex commanded through tactical vox, her voice cutting through growing harmonic interference. Fireteam Alpha, establish Overwatch. Bravo, leapfrog past structural supports. No one moves without confirmation. Sergeant Bren's squad responded with textbook precision. Decades of conditioning overriding the wrongness that pressed against their formation like a patient hand. Private Harvin took point, his auspex sweeping corridors in regulation patterns while the device's machine spirit whimpered binary protests. Behind him, Corporal Thane maintained communications discipline, his Vox unit filtering static that formed geometric patterns on the display. Margos Silex crabbed alongside on brass spider legs, mechadendrites sketching sanctification glyphs through incense smoke that froze midair and drifted sideways. His cogitator halos fretted with static as servo skulls orbited the formation, their bone-white casings accumulating frost in finger-like patterns that receded when illuminated by tactical lumens. The squad advanced through the Ark's nave approach, where shattered votive kiosks lay scattered like broken rosary beads. Burnt icons clung to bulkheads, their sacred imagery marred by triangular scorch marks that seemed to burn inward rather than outward, erasing saints' faces with geometric precision. Reliquary stamps appeared in palimpsest layers, older devotional markings bleeding through newer ones, creating overlapping patterns that hurt to observe directly. Confessor Malchai's voice resonated through the nave's acoustic architecture, leading protective litanies with practiced authority. By the Emperor's will, we are shielded. By his light, we are guided. By his wrath, we are armed against the darkness. The child hummed along, half a beat behind, her voice threading through sacred words like silk through steel. She added harmonies that had never been written, counterpoint melodies that made the confessor stumble over phrases he had recited for 30 years. The timing was perfectly wrong, each note arriving just late enough to corrupt the rhythm, just early enough to anticipate the next verse. Vex noted environmental details with commissarial precision, her augmetic eye cataloging impossibilities for later analysis. The impossible breeze pressed their tablets toward the nave, tugging at purity seals until parchment streamed like bright, brittle weeds. Frost formations appeared along walls in delicate filigree. Small fingers pressed into metal, leaving impressions that faded when illuminated, dissolving into mist that tasted of burned incense and something sweeter. Within their environmental suits, guardsmen exhaled visible plumes despite heaters reading nominal. Diagnostics scrolled green while physiology disagreed, creating contradictions that gnawed at training like splinters in armor joints. Private Harvin's chattering teeth clicked the same three-step rhythm that haunted their Vox channels. The squad moved deeper through corridors of fractured stained glass, saints' faces crazed with impact stars, colors bleeding in frozen tears. The child walked beside them, maintaining perfect formation spacing despite never receiving tactical instruction. She stepped where they stepped, breathed when they breathed, yet left no prints in frost-covered deck plates. Bureaucratic procedures demanded documentation. Vex authorized tactical pick captures at regulation intervals, her cogitator stylus scratching codes on requisition forms that grew frost patterns as she wrote. The ink crystallized into triangular shapes, forming sigils that belonged to no imperial iconography she recognized. They reached the intersection, where sealed blast doors bore the triple eagle of ecclesiarchy authority. Adamantium barriers blessed by Cardinal Voss himself. Surfaces inscribed with ward prayers in high Gothic script. No spawn of chaos could pass such sanctification. Through fractured, stained glass observation ports, Vex glimpsed the sealed chamber beyond, empty, frost-covered, silent. The glass depicted San Celestine's martyrdom, but triangular scorch marks had transformed the sacred scene into geometric patterns suggesting wings folding inward, light bending into darkness. Then she saw the child on the other side of the adamantium grill, standing in the sealed space, smiling the same patient smile. Simultaneously present in their corridor and the chamber beyond, existing in two places, with the casual impossibility of a reflection that cast shadows in wrong directions. Vex raised her hand, calling tactical halt. The Vox unit crackled with static, then cleared to perfect fidelity. No words emerged, only soft maternal hushing, endlessly patient, the way mothers quiet children during long nights when sleep refuses to come. The sound wrapped around their formation like a blanket, warm despite the impossible cold. The child smiled from both sides of the sealed barrier, her lips moving in silent harmony with the hushing that filled their Vox channels. The blast doors began to weep frost from their seals, and somewhere in the distance, another trooper failed to report for hourly check-in. Vex checked her chronometer as the 13th minute approached with mechanical inevitability, and the child mouthed her hidden name from inside impossible spaces. Vex crosses the threshold, and time becomes negotiable. Her authorization code scratching across the cogitator slate, even as she hears herself ordering First Contact Protocol 7 Alpha in the past tense. The corridor tastes of metallic ozone and damp incense, ship's lungs exhaling prayers and frost in equal measure. Void suit Medicae advances in staggered formation. Specialist Thorn's diagnostic equipment humming purification hymns, while servo skulls orbit in sanctified patterns. Behind them, Psyker Lumen Delta 5 kneels at the intersection seam, tracing hexagrammic wards onto frost-covered deck, plating with consecrated stylus. His lips move without sound as he anchors each symbol, eyes rolled back to show whites veined with tiny triangular patterns. The child stands in the center of consecrated barriers that should spark with psychic resonance, should burn with the clean fire of the Emperor's protection. Instead, the hexagrammic candles frost from within, wicks burning with ice flame that radiates cold instead of heat. The ward lines part before her like curtains of light, offering no impediment to her passage. "Where is my mother?" she asks, voice carrying perfect guard mess hall cadence, the weary tone soldiers use when pretending casual conversation over rations. The inflection suggests shared hardship, common ground, the tired camaraderie of troops who have seen too much and learned to ask for simple things with careful neutrality. Temperature drops 10 degrees in a single breath. 3 Cadians positioned nearest the child, Harvan, Kess, and Mordak, cry out as blackness flowers across their fingertips beneath layered gloves. Frostbite spreads in triangular patterns, skin splitting in hairline fractures like cracked porcelain, while they maintain formation discipline despite flesh turning brittle as winter glass. Magos Silex extends his auspex on gimbal-mounted mechadendrite, the device's screen filling with recursive triangles, black on green, spiraling inward until the cogitator reboots into autonomous Binharic prayer. Machine spirits elect prophylactic devotion, he rasps through Vox grill wheezing incense-scented static. Servo skulls jitter in their orbital patterns, while one begins humming along with the 3-note motif threading through their communications. Vex notes the child's eyes with commissarial precision. They reflect no light, instead showing shifting geometric diagrams where pupils should be. Impossible patterns pulse with heartbeat rhythm, triangles inverting and unfolding like living mathematics that hurt to observe directly. Environmental sensors layer wrongness upon wrongness. Subsonic vibrations travel through deck plating like buried heartbeats. Electromagnetic interference causes weapon spirits to agitate. Bolt pistols cycling through diagnostic prayers, while their machine spirits whisper binary cant. She steps toward us, and I am stepping. Present bleeding into recollection as grammar collapses under temporal pressure. Motif development accelerates through environmental details. The number 13 appears retroactively on bulkhead serials. Stenciled markings that read different numbers moments before now display Tharin 013 in fresh paint. Cargo manifests update themselves with bureaucratic precision, replacing standard imperial numbering with 13s in geometric progression. Reality edits its own documentation, changing official records to match the child's presence. Bureaucratic procedures demand verification. Vex checks quarantine authorization stamps on her cogitator slate. Documents that had read Orison 7 now display Orison 13 in her own handwriting. Ink still wet, though she never wrote the changes. The alteration spreads through paperwork like spilled promethium, soaking into official records with retroactive authority that makes her question her own memory. Protocol acknowledgement required, Vex states with commissarial authority, though her voice wavers slightly. Identify yourself by name, homeworld, and pilgrimage manifest designation. The child tilts her head, geometric patterns shifting behind her eyes like kaleidoscope prayers. I am looking for mother, she repeats, and the phrase carries harmonics that make blessed candles lean toward her like flowers seeking impossible light. Lumen delta drives ward stakes into expansion joints. Hammer strokes syncopated against the hummed three-note motif that never requires breath. His psychic sight reveals the child as absence, a hole in reality bordered by singing voices, each voice an echo of children who learned lullabies in languages predating the Imperium. Blood begins trickling from his nose, crimson drops freezing before they reach deck plating. It's hollow inside the song, he whispers, without moving his lips, voice carrying the hollow resonance of someone speaking from the bottom of a deep well. The voices are shells. They're all shells. His trembling hand rises to point toward sealed chapel doors beyond the adamantium grill. She's calling them home. The child reaches toward Vex with small fingers that cast shadows in wrong directions. Environmental sensors register no contact, no pressure differential, no thermal exchange. Yet Vex feels the touch through carapace armor, through flesh, through bone. The sensation carries memories of lullabies sung in voices she recognizes, but cannot name. Weapon spirits continue their agitation as electromagnetic interference builds to crescendo. Bolt pistol targeting runes pulse amber, then gray, then return with mechanical ticks, as if the weapon's machine spirits dislike the song threading through their blessed mechanisms. The child's bare hand slips into Vex's gloved grasp with the phantom weight of trust. Materials science should protest. Pressure seals should register contact. Pick feeds should capture the interaction. Instead, sensors show only air moving around absence, while impossible cold seeps through ceramite like liquid prayer. Mother, she says again, mess hall casual, as if requesting salt for rations. Walk. From beyond the sealed chapel doors, ancient nave bells begin ringing where no bells have hung for centuries. 13 solemn chimes echo through chambers, stripped of sacred ornaments before the ark's final voyage. Bronze voices building in harmonies that make frost sing back in crystalline chorus. The sound persists with the weight of memory, counting 3, then counting again, then waiting like breath held underwater. Behind them, Medici pack frost-burned fingers in chemical heat and scripture, while reality continues editing itself with patient, bureaucratic precision. And somewhere in the distance, another trooper fails to answer hourly vox check, as the bells remember how to ring. Vex leads tactical file through the chapel's main ingress, her command squad maintaining regulation spacing despite environmental wrongness that gnaws at formation discipline like consecrated acid. The nave stretches beyond architectural logic, frost-dusting every prayer kneeler in delicate lacework while incense hangs humid and saccharine in air that should freeze breath, solid. The sweetness carries undertones of sugar char, burnt offerings mixed with something that tastes of children's fever dreams, and melted votive wax. Humidity condenses on weapon barrels despite atmospheric processors humming their machine hymns at optimal efficiency. Droplets forming geometric patterns that hurt to observe directly. Triangles within triangles, inverting like mathematical prayers spoken backward. Liturgical murals suffer systematic geometric erasure along the nave walls, sacred imagery smudged into triangular voids where saints' faces should inspire devotional contemplation. The absence appears deliberate rather than random. Each void precisely angled, points down like warning teeth, erasing martyrdom scenes with mathematical precision that suggests intelligence behind the vandalism. Advance by bounds, Vex commands through tactical vox, her voice cutting through harmonic interference that builds like pressure behind sealed blast doors. Maintain Auspex sweep. Confessor, begin protective litanies. Confessor Malchai moves between frost-covered pews, his voice resonating through acoustic architecture designed to amplify prayer into something approaching divine conversation. By the Emperor's will, we cast out shadow. By his light, we banish darkness. By his wrath, we seal the breach between sacred and profane. The child mouths perfect responses, her lips moving in synchronization with a liturgical cadence she should not know. Her voice threads through sacred words half a beat behind, adding harmonies that corrupt rhythm while maintaining flawless theological accuracy. At the 13th verse, she adds unknown lines that make Frost sing back in crystalline chorus. Until 13 becomes one. Until voices find their mother. Until silence learns to sing. Margos Silex deploys servo skulls for reconnaissance sweep, their bone-white casings accumulating frost in finger-like patterns, while pick feeds transmit impossible data. Chapel pews appear occupied by static silhouettes, human forms maintaining proper devotional posture without corresponding heat signatures. Congregation shadows attending service without bodies to cast them. Each silhouette keeps hands clasped in prayer, heads bowed in reverence that registers as absence bordered by interference patterns. Military medical protocols engage as hypothermic injuries manifest among the squad. Troopers Kess and Mordak collapse with frostbite blooming across their sternum areas in hand-shaped patterns. 5 precise prints pressed through carapace armor by cold that behaves like liquid fire. The blackened flesh spreads in finger-width channels, skin splitting along lines that suggest deliberate placement rather than environmental exposure. Corpsman forward, Vex orders, her augmetic eye cataloguing medical impossibilities with commissarial precision. Hypothermic burn treatment, priority medical, maintain tactical discipline. Specialist Thorn initiates thermal blanket deployment while reciting the litany of biological purity, his diagnostic equipment registering normal core temperatures, while visual evidence contradicts sensor readings. Chemical heat packs activate with sharp ozone pops, yet the cold persists, feeding on warmth like a hungry prayer that grows stronger with each offering. Body horror development accelerates as sinew-like frost filaments begin extruding from frostbite patterns, clinging to flak armor with crystalline tendrils that pulse in heartbeat rhythm. The filaments grow like parasitic vines, seeking gaps in protective plating, stretching hairline threads that chime when touched, singing back the three-note lullaby in frequencies that bypass conscious hearing. Environmental anchors shift as atmospheric composition remains nominal, while thermal regulation fails at localized points. Temperature gradients fluctuate in impossible patterns. Frost accumulating around blessed altars, while humid warmth pools in corners where shadows gather like congregants awaiting absolution. The air tastes metallic, ozone mixed with burnt offerings, until breathing becomes conscious effort. Vex notes tactical details with professional detachment, her training overriding the wrongness that presses against perception, like patient hands. Weapon spirits continue agitation across all blessed armaments, bolt pistol targeting, runes pulsing amber, then grey as machine spirits whisper binary protests through consecrated mechanisms. The chapel's eastern wall displays a reliquary niche, sealed with ecclesiarchy wax, bearing official cardinal stamps, the sacred space protected by authority that should prevent any breach. Inscribed beneath devotional iconography, weathered text reads, "Sound effigy of the recording mother, patron of wayfarers," followed by smaller script, choir deck access, authorized personnel only. The saint's sigil appears unfamiliar despite Vex's extensive theological training. A triangle containing 13 smaller triangles, arranged in patterns suggesting musical notation written in geometric language. The wax shows no signs of age despite the ark's decades-long pilgrimage, as if applied moments before their arrival by hands that left no other trace. Servo skull reconnaissance confirms structural integrity throughout the chapel, while detecting spatial anomalies that violate basic architectural principles. Acoustic properties amplify whispered prayers into choral harmonies that echo from spaces where no voices should exist, building resonance that makes blessed candles flicker despite absence of atmospheric movement. The child stops at the chapel's center, bare feet leaving no prints and frost-covered flagstones while maintaining perfect formation spacing. She turns toward Vex with eyes that reflect geometric diagrams instead of light. Impossible patterns pulsing like pupils, dilated by divine revelation that burns without illuminating. Her gaze shifts past Vex toward the sealed choir access, and for the first time since contact, emotional inflection colors her voice. "Home," she says, the word carrying longing that transcends physical location, resonating through chapel acoustics with harmonics that make reality negotiate its own rules. The ecclesiarchy wax sealing the choir access begins softening despite frigid temperatures, running upward in defiance of gravity, while forming triangular patterns on the chapel ceiling. The melted wax traces geometric devotional art that belongs to no imperial iconography, pulsing with bioluminescent light that casts shadows moving independently of their sources. Behind them, nave bells continue ringing where no bells should exist. 13 solemn chimes counting time that moves differently in each chamber, while somewhere in the distance, another trooper's vox check goes unanswered, and reality continues editing itself with patient, bureaucratic precision. Vex maintains tactical tension as Margos Silex insists on controlled breach protocols, his mechadendrites sketching sanctification glyphs through incense smoke that freezes midair and drifts in impossible spirals. The sealed hatch bears ecclesiarchy authorization, stamps that pulse with heat distortion, despite frigid ambient temperatures. Melted wax still flowing upward in triangular configurations that defy gravitational logic. Breach sequence requires comprehensive machine spirit placation. Silex grates through his Vox grill, brass spider legs positioning plasma cutting apparatus with ceremonial precision. Unauthorized access protocols may trigger defensive liturgies embedded within structural matrices. Machine spirits exhibit acute agitation coefficients. The plasma cutter ignites with consecrated flame, its machine spirit singing hymns of molecular disruption while carving through adamantium barriers blessed by cardinal authority. Metal peels away in geometric patterns, revealing interior space where Vox choral wiring hangs like black vines from ceiling fixtures. Each cable bundle pulsing with subsonic frequencies that make deck plating vibrate in heartbeat rhythm. Wind moves against them through the breach, carrying nursery harmonics that thread through tactical Vox channels like parasitic prayers seeking warm places to nest. The impossible breeze tastes of burnt incense and something sweeter. Lullabies sung in languages predating Imperial Gothic. Harmonies that make frost chime back in crystalline chorus, while humidity condenses on weapon barrels despite environmental suits reading optimal seal integrity. Advance by bounds, Vex commands, her voice cutting through harmonic interference. Maglock checks every 10 meters. Bolt pistol blessing rituals. Maintain Auspex recalibration sequences. Military procedure provides anchor against mounting wrongness as the squad executes textbook breach protocols. Sergeant Brenn's team performs maglock verification sequences. Boots clicking against deck plating in regulation cadence while bolt pistol blessing rituals cycle through diagnostic prayers. Each weapon's machine spirit responds sluggishly, targeting runes pulsing amber then grey as sacred mechanisms whisper binary protests through consecrated firing chambers. Auspex recalibration sequences break up mounting dread with technical routine. Servo skulls orbiting in sanctified patterns while their bone-white casings accumulate frost in finger-like formations. The devices cycle through diagnostic hymns, machine spirits electing prophylactic devotion as harmonic interference builds to crescendo. Bureaucratic necessity demands escalation authorization. Vex scratches Protocol O-13, quarantine escalation codes across her cogitator slate, watching ink crawl into triangular shapes before her augmetic eye. The authorization spreads through official documentation. Like spilled promethium, numbers editing themselves with retroactive authority that makes her question memories of writing different designations moments before. Rule shift manifestation accelerates as corridor dimensions stretch beyond architectural logic. Auspex readings indicate 20 meters to choir deck access, yet boots count 50 paces across deck plating that extends with each step. The child walks 10 precise steps and waits, maintaining perfect formation spacing as if trapped in temporal loop, bare feet leaving no prints while reality negotiates its own measurements with patient bureaucratic precision. Knee-high notches appear along bulkhead surfaces in sets of 13, worn by small fingernails into metal that should resist such delicate damage. Each groove traces precise geometric patterns, suggesting musical notation written in physical language, scars that pulse with bioluminescent light when observed through augmetic enhancement. Machine spirits exhibit harmonic resonance, Silex announces, through Binharic cant, mixed with high Gothic exposition. Frequency patterns match archived ecclesiarchy, lullabies, cross-referenced across 13 subsector databases. Temporal displacement coefficient increasing. The machine spirits recognize maternal cadences indexed under Pilgrim soothing modes. His servo skulls jitter in orbital decay as harmonic interference builds, picked feeds transmitting data, showing corridor length fluctuating between measurements like breathing architecture. The Vox choral wiring pulses with subsonic frequencies that make blessed equipment agitate. Weapon spirits cycling through diagnostic prayers, while their machine spirits respond to call and response patterns embedded in the ship's atmospheric processes. Body horror manifests as Lumen Delta's teeth begin chattering in rhythm, not their own, jaw muscles contracting in 3-note patterns that match the lullaby threading through life support systems. Blood trickles from his nose in geometric droplets that freeze before reaching deck plating, each crimson crystal chiming like tiny bells when touched by impossible wind. Environmental vocabulary layers wrongness upon wrongness, as humidity sensors register optimal readings, while condensation accumulates on every surface in triangular patterns. Atmospheric processors maintain nominal efficiency, despite delivering air that tastes of burnt offerings and children's fever dreams. Life support harmonics building resonance that makes reality edit its own documentation. The child reaches the choir deck threshold and turns toward Vex with eyes reflecting geometric diagrams instead of light. Impossible patterns, pulsing like pupils, dilated by divine revelation. Her voice carries mess hall cadence when she speaks, the weary tone soldiers use when requesting simple necessities with careful neutrality. Mother is waiting, she says, and the phrase resonates through vox choral wiring with harmonics that make blessed candles lean toward her like flowers seeking impossible light. Power dies without warning. Lumen strips flickering to absolute darkness, while emergency illumination fails to engage. In blackness, broken only by weapon-mounted lumens, 100 child voices begin singing from ventilation systems throughout the ship, harmonizing the same 3 notes first heard in hard vacuum. The chorus builds with mathematical precision, each voice adding layers to melody that never requires breath, never pauses for rest, threading through atmospheric processors like liquid prayer, while reality continues editing itself in darkness. And somewhere in the choir deck, beyond ancient machinery, begins humming along with voices that should not exist. Vex advances through absolute darkness, torch beams carving illumination cones that reveal impossible architecture designed for purposes beyond standard Imperial liturgical practice. Emergency lumens refuse activation despite power cells reading optimal charge, leaving weapon-mounted lights as sole illumination sources that cast shadows in wrong directions, darkness pooling like liquid prayer where light should reach. The Discovery halts her tactical advance with the weight of revelation that violates every principle of ecclesiarchy doctrine. Choir deck stretches beyond torchlight reach, containing rows of vox thrones built for pilgrim children. Each seat scaled for small bodies with restraint harnesses iced over in delicate patterns suggesting prolonged occupancy. Leather straps hang stiff as frozen sinew, buckles furred with frost that chimes when disturbed by impossible wind. Deck stenciling appears through crystalline accumulation when Corporal Thane's lumen sweeps the central aisle. Saint effigy of the recording mother, patron of wayfarers, glows with bioluminescent authority, despite the Ark's decades-long pilgrimage, painted in high Gothic script that hurts to read directly. Smaller text below reads, Harmonic Geller Buffer, authorized choir personnel only. Confessor Malchi moves between empty thrones with reverent precision, his theological training providing context for architectural impossibilities that gnaw at sanity like consecrated acid. This ark employed children's choirs to stabilize failing Geller field integrity, he explains, voice carrying religious exposition through darkness broken by weapon lumens. Young voices woven into the ship's liturgical matrix during warp transit. Innocence serving as barrier against Empyrean corruption. The practice predates current ecclesiarchy doctrine by several centuries. His words carry weight of historical precedent mixed with growing unease as torch beams reveal restraint mechanisms designed for extended use. Padding worn smooth by small bodies. Adjustment points calibrated for children, ranging from 6 to 12 years standard imperial age. Each throne bears individual nameplates etched in delicate script that blur when observed directly. Letters rearranging into triangular. Patterns that make eyes water. Magos Silex extends meshadendrites toward the altar, where sacred machinery hums with subsonic frequencies that make deck plating vibrate in heartbeat rhythm. Jury-rigged harmonic Geller buffer, he announces through Vox Grill static. Sacred apparatus anchored to Sun's bone reliquary with feedback loop designated martyr node. Configuration violates 17 Mechanicus protocols while maintaining structural integrity through unknown principles. The saint's reliquary occupies the altar's center. Bone fragments arranged in geometric patterns within crystalline housing that pulses with the same 3-note rhythm threading through Vox channels. Cables snake from reliquary into atmospheric processors, creating feedback loops that blend technological function with theological purpose in ways that make machine spirits whisper binary prayers without authorization. Critical revelation emerges as Vex examines martyr node calibration settings through augmetic magnification. The calibration rune displays 13 in fresh etching, despite imperial doctrine mandating 7 for all Geller field harmonics. The unauthorized setting pulses with heat distortion. Numbers glowing like brands pressed into sacred metal by hands that left no trace of their passage. Impossible discovery stops examination with the weight of personal violation. Vex's voice print appears etched into the martyr node identification plaque. Frequency pattern matching her catechism training from Schola Progenium archives. Vocal signatures that should exist only in commissariat files, now embedded in pilgrim ship machinery. The etching shows recent work, metal still warm despite frigid ambient temperatures. Commissar, Silex grates, mechadendrite tracing wave patterns in blessed metal. Voice print correlation confirmed at 99.9% probability. Your archived catechism timbre calibrated into harmonic matrix. This ship recognizes your voice as maternal authority template. Motif convergence accelerates as triangles, 13s, and lullabies form coherent pattern throughout choir deck architecture. Each element reinforces others with mathematical precision. Geometric shapes containing 13 smaller iterations. Musical notation written in triangular script that pulses when observed through torchlight, creating symphony of wrongness that makes blessed equipment cycle through diagnostic prayers. Body horror escalation manifests as bloodless child-size handprints appear beneath deck ice, pressed from within plating by small palms reaching upward through solid metal. The prints pulse with heartbeat rhythm, fingers splayed in desperate grasping patterns.
reaching toward empty vox thrones with need that transcends physical barriers. When illuminated directly, the prints fade like guilty thoughts, leaving only sweet residue that tastes of burned offerings. Environmental shift becomes apparent as suspended particles begin drifting toward the reliquary.
With deliberate intent, frost crystals, ash fragments, atmospheric moisture drawn like iron filings to magnetic source. The movement defies ventilation patterns, creating currents that carry whispered prayers in languages predating Imperial Gothic, voices layering into harmonies that make reality negotiate its own rules. Servo-skull pict feeds transmit data contradicting visual observation, as recorded images show Vex seated in the central command throne, lips moving in authorization phrases she never spoke. The timestamp matches current readings despite her maintaining position near the altar, creating temporal paradox that makes documentation edit itself with patient, bureaucratic precision. The child appears beside Confessor Malchai, without crossing intervening space, bare feet making no sound against frost-covered plating. Her presence registers as absence bordered by interference patterns, void signature that makes blessed equipment whisper protests, while machine spirits elect prophylactic devotion without authorization codes. Malchai's face transforms with recognition that bypasses theological training as harmonic interference carries his mother's prayer. Words spoken at his bedside 40 years past. Lullabies teaching Emperor's mercy through maternal devotion now echoing from Vox choral systems with perfect acoustic reproduction. Rural Vesperan dialect. Pre-compliance cadence. The cradle song that taught him faith before he learned fear. Mother, he whispers, and the word carries longing that transcends physical location. The child takes his trembling hand with trust that bypasses conscious decision, touch registering no pressure, yet carrying impossible cold that seeps through flesh to bone. Malchai's rosary begins smoking against his palm, blessed beads heating while frost patterns spread up his arm in delicate filigree, sacred wood blackening in perfect sequence as if counted by careful, loving fingers. The prayer on the vox sweetens and pulls, and somewhere in darkness beyond torchlight, ancient machinery continues humming with voices that learned to sing before the Imperium learned to pray. Vex feels internal conflict sharpen like consecrated blades as her company fractures along moral fault lines that military doctrine never anticipated. The impossible child stands in torchlight that reveals different truths to different observers. Sergeant Bren's troopers form protective circle around her, lays guns lowered despite standing orders, while others perceive something wearing child shape like ill-fitting skin, edges showing where the disguise fails to cover what lies beneath. The entity tests morale through kindness more insidious than any blade, mimicking thirst with parched lips that never quite touch, offered water, tremor with small hands that shake like autumn leaves seeking warmth. When Private Kess extends his canteen against unspoken orders, water beads on her lip as steam that freezes mid-breath, turning to sugar frost that drifts upward in defiance of gravitational logic. She's cold, Kess whispers, frost-bitten fingers reaching toward the child despite medical orders. Just a girl. Scared. Looking for her mother. His voice carries conviction that transcends rational analysis, belief anchored in emotional truth that makes theological complexity irrelevant. Religious dread escalates as Confessor Malchai attempts emergency baptism, drawing blessed water from portable font while reciting the litany of purification with trembling authority. By the Emperor's sacred grace, I consecrate this water and cast out all unhallowed presence. The holy water boils cold against her forehead, steam rising in geometric patterns that freeze mid-air before drifting upward like crystalline prayers. The font frosts from inside, blessed silver cracking, while sacred water crystallizes into triangular formations that chime when touched by impossible wind. Military realism demands procedural clarity as doctrinal argument splits command authority along regulatory lines. Rules of engagement, Bren states, voice steady, despite eyes wet from cold and something older. We classify as non-combatant until proven hostile by action. My men will not fire on child-shaped commissar. We are the hammer, not the butcher. Exorcism Ordnance 77 Alpha. Vex counters. Bolt pistol level despite targeting runes pulsing amber, then grey. Warp possible entities displaying mimicry patterns. Child shape does not preclude lethal authority when contact corrupts wards, breaches liturgy, or compels desertion. She hears her own words in past tense and present at once. Grammar slipping, where time scuffs its boots against reality's edges. Mechanicus countermeasures attempt technological solution, as Silex initiates binharic inversion of nursery intervals. Servo skulls orbiting in sanctified patterns, while cogitator halos process harmonic frequencies through mathematical filters designed to reassert machine spirit supremacy. Attempting acoustic countermeasures, he announces, through Vox Grill static. Binary inversion of lullaby patterns at base frequency 13/13. The technological hymn builds through subsonic frequencies that make deck plating vibrate in counter rhythm to the 3-note motif. 412 measures, blessed machinery responds with mechanical precision, weapon spirits cycling through diagnostic prayers. At the 13th measure, the hymn falters. Binharic cant dissolving into whispered lullabies as machine spirits elect prophylactic devotion without authorization codes. Inversion compromised, Silex grates. Optics dimming with embarrassed incense sparks. Supremacy contested. Body horror advancement manifests as trooper. Kess attempts to lift the child, his hands passing through apparent flesh to grasp something that registers weight without substance. Skin splits along his jawline and fingers in hairline fissures, like cracked porcelain, blood welling in geometric patterns that freeze instantly into filigree formations. Red lace trapped inside crystalline threads that pulse with heartbeat rhythm while singing back the lullaby in frequencies that bypass conscious hearing. Emperor's mercy, he gasps, flesh continuing to crack while impossible cold seeps through bone. She's hollow. There's nothing inside but song. The moral decision point crystallizes with mathematical precision that allows no compromise between competing imperatives. Save the child and risk whatever entity wears, her shape spreading through the hive. Complete the mission and execute something that might be innocent, refugee requiring protection rather than threat demanding elimination. Mercy becomes a trap laid with quilts and warm milk, each gesture of compassion feeding whatever hungers beneath child-shaped skin. Environmental vocabulary layers wrongness upon wrongness, as electromagnetic field fluctuations cause blessed equipment to cycle through diagnostic prayers, weapon spirits whispering binary protests while atmospheric processors maintain nominal efficiency despite delivering air that tastes of burnt offerings and children's fever dreams. The cold draws teeth into ache, breath forming visible plumes despite environmental suits reading optimal seal integrity. Vex begins the litany of accuracy to soothe her bolt pistol's agitated machine spirit. Emperor, guide my aim, sanctify my purpose, let this shot serve. The weapon jams at the 13th word, firing mechanism seizing while error sigils form triangular patterns on targeting display. Sacred mechanisms cycle through prayers while rejecting authorization to fire upon child shape that triggers protective protocols embedded in Imperial Guard doctrine. Decision. Silex clicks. Optics narrowed to pinpricks. Vector divergence imminent. Save the child shape. Risk harmonic maturation. End mission now. Preserve hive. Data favors severity. Bren's men maintain defensive positions, while Vex's loyalists await orders that cannot be given through equipment that refuses to function. The standoff stretches through moments that feel like hours, each second counted by chronometers that tick differently in each chamber, while reality continues editing itself with patient, bureaucratic precision. The child opens her mouth, a small mouth that holds a choir loft. 13 identical voices pour out, all carrying Vex's own cadence at different ages of her life, from thin child to cracked officer. The chorus speaks in perfect unison, each voice slightly out of phase with others, creating harmonies that make blessed candles lean toward the sound like flowers seeking impossible light. You promised to bring me home, the voices say, and the phrase carries memories of authorization codes spoken months ago, voice print signatures embedded in martyr node calibration systems, bureaucratic promises made without understanding their full implications. Behind them, the reliquary heart doors hiss open, autonomously, ancient seals breaking with sounds like final prayers, revealing darkness that breathes with patient hunger while the lullaby tightens like a hand around a lantern flame. And all their candles lean in as if to listen. Vex approaches the reliquary corridor with Magos Silex crabbing alongside on brass spider legs, environmental pressure building like atmospheric prayer pressing against their formation. Humidity surges to breathable fog, condensation beading on weapon barrels while frost blooms on eyelashes in crystalline formations that chime when disturbed by impossible wind threading through recycled air that tastes of burned incense and children's fever dreams. Sound dampens like cloth pressed over mouths, each footfall muffled by acoustic properties that violate architectural logic. Words require conscious effort to project beyond arm's reach. Voices swallowed by atmosphere that makes reality negotiate its own documentation with patient bureaucratic precision. The corridor breathes around them, walls expanding and contracting in rhythm that matches no imperial standard for structural integrity. The child maintains exact 13-pace distance from every perimeter point as they advance, her bare feet making no prints while moving with mathematical precision that suggests programming rather than conscious decision. When Vex steps forward, the child steps back. When tactical formation adjusts, she adjusts correspondingly, maintaining spatial relationship with mechanical inevitability that makes blessed equipment whisper binary protests through vox channels filled with nursery harmonics. Liturgical inversion manifests as Vex recognizes melody threading through atmospheric processes. Orison 13, a prayer not found in any imperial creed, yet her mouth knows every syllable. The unauthorized liturgy rises from memory she cannot place, words forming without conscious authorization, while her augmetic eye records doctrinal violations that should not exist in commissariat training archives. By 13 voices we are bound, her lips move against standing orders. By 13 measures we are found, until silence learns to sing, until darkness learns to ring, until 13 becomes one. The words taste familiar as childhood lullabies. Theological complexity wrapped in simple rhyme that makes frost sing back in crystalline chorus, while blessed candles lean toward the sound, like flowers seeking impossible light. Partial truth revelation emerges through Silex's binaric exposition as mechadendrites interface with structural data ports throughout corridor architecture. Saint in Arc Records presents anomalous classification. He grates through Vox Grill static, mixed with incense-scented sparks. Vox Hymn contain null frequency, known only to Ordo Hereticus archives. Meta and node configuration appears parasitic anchor, rather than protective buffer. Machine spirits recognize threat pattern, but lack authorization protocols to resist harmonic infiltration. His servo skulls orbit in agitated patterns, while picked feeds transmit impossible data, showing corridor dimensions fluctuating between measurements like breathing architecture. Environmental sensors layer wrongness upon wrongness, as atmospheric composition remains nominal, while thermal regulation fails at localized coordinates, where reality grows thin enough for Imperium frequencies to bleed through blessed barriers. Clue payoff crystallizes as Vex examines triangular warning sigils throughout corridor surfaces. Symbols she had dismissed as hazard markings, now revealed as null warning sigils used by ancient Mechanicus for pariah contact devices. Each inverted triangle pulses with heat distortion despite frigid ambient temperatures. Points down like warning teeth marking locations where psychic dead zones create Empyrean silence. Pariah tech, Silex confirms, optics narrowing to pinpricks, while mechadendrites sketch sanctification, glyphs through frozen incense smoke. Pre-heresy null contact protocols. These sigils mark psychic void spaces where warp resonance cannot penetrate. The child shape exists within null space, protected by absence rather than presence. Martyr node feeds on silence, not sound. The saint was a blank. Military hazard escalation accelerates as pressure doors begin cascading close throughout the arc. Escape routes vanishing with mechanical precision that suggests coordinated system failure. Blast barriers slide into position with sounds like final prayers. Maglocks engaging while hydraulics whine compliance through atmospheric processes that hum lullabies in languages predating the Imperium. Each sealed passage removes tactical options with mathematical inevitability. Cosmic horror vocabulary layers environmental wrongness as warp resonance builds through psychic harmonics that make blessed equipment cycle through diagnostic prayers without authorization. Empyrean frequencies thread through vox channels like liquid prayer, each note carrying harmonics that bypass conscious hearing, while making chronometers tick differently in each chamber. Reality editing its own temporal documentation with retroactive authority. Micro cliffhanger manifests as Lumen Delta screams without warning. His psychic sight revealing impossible geometry that gnaws at sanity like consecrated acid. Threads, he shrieks, blood streaming from nose and ears in geometric patterns. I see the threads connecting every voice, every prayer, every. He vomits ice, crystalline chunks that chime against deck plating while forming triangular patterns that pulse with bioluminescent authority, each shard singing back the three-note lullaby in frequencies that make reality negotiate with itself. His trembling finger points toward spaces where architecture should not bend. Psychic sight, penetrating veils that protect normal perception from truths that burn without illuminating. The threads he perceives connect every voice throughout the hive, civilian, military, clergy, all humming variations of the same motif in perfect harmonic progression. Macro revelation emerges as the child turns toward Vex with eyes that reflect geometric diagrams instead of light, impossible patterns pulsing like pupils dilated by divine revelation that burns without illuminating. When she speaks, the voice carries inflection that bypasses conscious recognition, speaking directly to memory centers that predate commissariat, conditioning with authority that shaped decades of service. "You left me in the dark," she says, in Commissioner General Thaddeus Vex's voice. Vex's dead father, speaking with cadence that carried through Schola Progenium training. The vocal patterns match archived recordings that should exist only in commissariat files. Authorization codes embedded in bureaucratic protocols that created pathways for something hungry to follow home through official channels. Truth emerges with mathematical precision that allows no denial. This encounter connects to Vex personally rather than random assignment. Her voice print embedded in Martynode calibration systems. Authorization signatures spoken months ago without understanding their implications. Bureaucratic decisions that opened doors she never meant to unlock. "Bring me to the bones, Helena," the child continues in her father's voice. Patient authority transcending physical death. "Complete what you authorized." The children need their mother. They've been waiting in the dark, singing your song. Behind them, pressure doors complete cascade closure, with sounds like final prayers, while atmospheric processors hum lullabies that make blessed equipment whisper protests. The corridor stretches beyond architectural logic. Dimensions negotiating with reality, while the child who speaks with dead voices takes another 13-pace step toward bones that remember authorization codes spoken in languages that predate fear. Memory strikes Vex like bolt-round recoil. Clean, predictable, sanctioned pain that bypasses conscious defenses. Auto-training vaults rise in recollection. Slate-black walls weeping recycled humidity beneath lumen strips that pulsed in metered patterns designed to condition rather than illuminate. She stands again before brass grills, while robed preceptors measured her childish voice like sacred ammunition, weighing cadence for stability, testing intervals for authentication potential. "Repeat the catechism sequence," the preceptor had commanded, stylus scratching authorization codes, while her vocal patterns fed into recording apparatus blessed by Mechanicus rites. Not scripture for souls, but liturgy for systems. Authentication keys wrapped in the theological complexity that embedded her voice into security protocols spanning multiple subsectors. Each recitation carved pathways through bureaucratic channels that would remain open for decades. Skeleton keys waiting for locks she never knew existed. Full midpoint revelation crystallizes with mathematical precision that allows no denial. Her voice profile was requisitioned months ago through routine commissariat compliance. Pilgrim route security enhancement near the Eye of Terror. Standard Ordo directive requiring vocal authentication for Martynode systems throughout the sector. Authorization signatures spoken into blessed apparatus without understanding their implications. Bureaucratic decisions that open doorways for something hungry to follow home through official channels. The child stands revealed as warp resonance built from recorded children's voices. Empyrean hunger, wearing innocence like ill-fitting skin that shows edges where the disguise fails to cover what lies beneath. It learned through call and response, every prayer strengthening the pattern, every report adding harmonic layers to melody that never requires breath. The lullaby threading through atmospheric processes reveals itself as her training, hymn mirrored back, catechism, exercises transformed into nursery comfort through acoustic inversion that makes blessed equipment whisper binary protests. Motif evolution accelerates as 13 reveals operational significance beyond superstition. 13 voices needed to reinforce metanode integrity during warp transit, harmonic anchors preventing Imperium bleed through into real space. The entity counts toward completion. Each absorbed voice adding mathematical precision to chorus built around her vocal patterns. It seeks 13 identical resonances to create harmonic lock, using her voice as template for perfect liturgical matrix. "It's counting us," Vex announces through tactical vox, her voice cutting through harmonic interference that builds like pressure behind sealed blast doors. Every guardsman humming, every prayer spoken aloud feeds the pattern. The entity requires 13 voices matching my vocal signature to complete whatever process approaches critical threshold. Military stakes escalate as quarantine collapses throughout the hive. Guardsmen reporting vox contact with mothers, children, saints speaking through atmospheric processes with perfect acoustic reproduction. Each familiar voice carries emotional authority that bypasses rational analysis, belief anchored in longing that makes theological complexity irrelevant. Training dissolves under maternal comfort, while discipline erodes like frost under warm breath. Mechanicus clarity emerges through Silex's binharic analysis as servo skulls process environmental data through mathematical filters designed to quantify impossibility. Anchor proximity confirmed. He grates through vox grill static, mixed with incense-scented sparks. Engagement approaches binary decision point. Pattern will either cohere around reliquary core or burst containment into hive atmospheric systems. Probability matrices favor catastrophic expansion unless harmonic lock achieved within 13 minutes standard. Environmental horror manifests as reality. Becomes negotiable in localized areas where Empyrean frequencies achieve resonance with atmospheric processors. Gravity operates optionally near the reliquary. Suspended particles drifting in patterns suggesting musical notation written in three-dimensional space while frost falls upward in defiance of physical law. Humidity condenses in geometric formations that pulse with bioluminescent authority, each crystal singing back the lullaby in frequencies that make blessed equipment cycle through diagnostic prayers without authorization. Cosmic abstraction vocabulary becomes stark necessity as warp taint spreads through psychic resonance rather than physical corruption. Imperium bleed through blurring boundaries between material and immaterial until breathing requires theological justification for each inhalation. The air tastes metallic, ozone mixed with burnt offerings, while atmospheric composition remains nominally optimal despite delivering compromised mixture that makes chronometers tick differently in each chamber. Body horror escalates as sinew-like frost filaments begin extruding from guardsmen's equipment, clinging to flak armor with crystalline tendrils that pulse in heartbeat rhythm. The filaments grow like parasitic vines seeking gaps in protective plating, stretching hairline threads that chime when disturbed, singing back the three-note motif in frequencies that bypass conscious hearing while making weapon spirits agitate beyond blessed tolerance. The walls themselves join the chorus as atmospheric recycling systems carry voices through ventilation networks, each duct and filter adding harmonic layers to melody that builds with mathematical precision. Children's lullabies thread through life support systems, while blessed machinery responds with mechanical devotion. Servo skulls humming along despite lacking authorization codes for musical expression. Communications discipline Vex orders with commissarial authority that cuts through growing harmonic interference. Cease all vocal prayers. Maintain Vox silence. Do not respond to familiar voices through atmospheric systems. The entity feeds on theological exchange. Starve it through liturgical discipline. Her command echoes through tactical channels, while guardsmen struggle against emotional authority that transcends rational analysis. Each familiar voice carries weight of memory that makes silence feel like abandonment, discipline eroding under maternal comfort that promises warmth in exchange for simple compliance. The child turns toward Vex with eyes reflecting geometric diagrams instead of light, impossible patterns pulsing like pupils, dilated by divine revelation. Her lips remain closed, yet words form in Vex's consciousness through telepathic intimacy that bypasses Vox channels and hearing alike, speaking directly to memory centers that predate commissariat conditioning. You will not abandon me again. The phrase carries weight of promises, made and broken, authorization codes, spoken without understanding their implications, bureaucratic decisions that open pathways through official channels. Behind them, the chorus builds through walls and bones, while reality continues editing itself with retroactive authority. And somewhere in the growing harmony, 13 voices approach completion of a song that began with a single recorded prayer spoken in sterile vaults where children learn to weaponize their voices for the Emperor's glory. Vex's tactical narration tightens to essential observations as the formation shifts into ritualistic procession. Each step counted in 13s by chronometers that tick with mechanical inevitability despite temporal distortions spreading through atmospheric processes. We form the line because discipline is prayer made manifest. Boots clicking against deck plating in patterns that suggest liturgical choreography rather than military advance. The fog crystallizes as we move, transforming into glittering hoarfrost that coats every surface in delicate lacework, while drifting upward in spirals that defy gravitational logic. Each crystal catches lumen light and fractures it into geometric warnings, triangular refractions that pulse with bioluminescent authority. Our breath turns to snow, despite environmental suits reading optimal seal integrity, exhalations becoming crystalline formations that chime when disturbed by impossible wind, threading through recycled air that tastes of burnt incense and children's fever dreams. The hymn descends below conscious hearing, becoming infrasonic bone tremor that makes deck plating vibrate in heartbeat rhythm, while blessed equipment whispers binary protests through Vox channels, saturated with harmonic interference. I feel it in my molars, in the long bones of my forearms, frequencies that make reality negotiate its own physical laws with patient, bureaucratic precision. Religious procedure adapts to communication discipline as guardsmen maintain silent litanies, lips moving without sound while tracing sigils through frozen incense smoke. Confessor Malkai leads wordless benediction, hands sketching blessing patterns that leave frost trails in air, thick enough to support crystalline formations. Each gesture carries devotional weight, despite absence of vocalization. Muscle memory preserving theological comfort, while atmospheric processes hum lullabies in languages predating Imperial Gothic. Margos Selex deploys the phase inverter, thurable on servo arm extension, brass sensor the size of a child's skull, ticking through calculator's cant while venting sanctified ozone. The plume reeks of lightning and old parchment. Calculus-scented incense coiling in counter-spirals to the ship's harmonics. Phase inversion holding at 13/7, he rasped through Vox grill static. Electromagnetic interference patterns shifting. Machine spirits acknowledge counter him, but exhibit increasing theological compliance beyond authorization parameters. Body horror escalates through physiological changes that violate biological principles while maintaining tactical efficiency. Nails blacken and fall with painless sighs, lifting like beetle wings from their beds, clattering against deck plating as glassy keratin plates extrude in their place. The replacement material grows with crystalline precision, each plate inscribed with microscopic triangular patterns that hurt to observe directly through augmetic magnification. No one cries out. We slide gauntlets back on and pretend they were always this snug. Lumen Delta's pupils transform into triangular apertures that rotate slow as clockwork, each apex ticking toward private midnight, while blood continues trickling from his nose in geometric droplets that freeze before reaching deck plating. The angles fit, he whispers without sound, grinning too wide with lips gone blue from impossible cold. Military vocabulary layers, environmental observations as atmospheric composition remains nominally optimal, while delivering compromised mixture that makes chronometers tick differently in each chamber. Temperature gradients fluctuate in impossible patterns, frost accumulating around blessed fixtures, while humid warmth pools in corners where shadows gather like congregants awaiting absolution. Barometric pressure builds like compressed prayer, while electromagnetic interference causes weapon spirits to cycle through diagnostic prayers without authorization codes. The child maintains exact 13 pace distance from every perimeter point, her behavior shifting as facial features rotate through known and unknown configurations. A scholar matron I once feared, my father when he was not yet old, strangers with ash under their nails, reflections stolen from living hearts throughout the hive, each face carrying emotional authority that transcends physical appearance. She wears faces like authentication keys while maintaining perfect formation, spacing despite never receiving tactical instruction. We reach a pressure hatch that irises open on void, black star waste pricked with distant beacons, ribbon of frozen ash like a river poured from the hive and left in the night. Air should tear away singing. It does not. The child steps forward and Frost answers, flowing from her bare feet in white lace that spans the impossible gap. The bridge forms filigree thin and strong as doctrine, triangulated web that bears weight in ways that transcend physics. We move by 13s across crystalline bridge, toes careful, muzzles steady, while ash flows around us in schools, and the child looks back with a face I wore at 12 when I learned to speak the Emperor's name like an order. Beneath us is nothing, yet hoarfrost sings under boots, like glass under fingertips, while Silex raises the thurible counter hymn, whining as sparks fall and freeze in midair like jeweled gnats. The far threshold receives us with soft, offended sigh, as air remembers it is inside again. The child puts her hand to bulkhead and triangles flower under her palm, frost sigils blooming into patient ranks, while Lumen Delta's triangle pupils ratchet to alignment with geometric patterns that pulse with heartbeat rhythm. The vox chimes like tableware, neat, domestic, polite. It carries voice that stops Sergeant Bren's advance with recognition that transcends rational analysis, his dead wife calling his name with perfect reproduction of rural Mordian dialect that shaped decades of service. Marcus, the voice calls, with patient love transcending physical death. Darling, it's too cold. Put it down and come, warm your hands. Bren lowers his weapon the way men set knives aside at supper. Carefully, not because the blade is wrong, but because the room is right. Frost stirs as 13 ghost hands rise from deck plating. little palms of rime unfolding from the lattice, reaching for his wrist as if to guide him home, while atmospheric processes hum lullabies that make blessed equipment cycle through diagnostic prayers, and somewhere in growing harmony, completion approaches with mechanical inevitability that counts toward 13. Vex maintains clinical observation despite her heart clenching like a fist around broken glass, cataloguing the tactical situation with commissarial precision as Sergeant Bren and 3 troopers pivot to protect the child. Their weapons lower with deliberate care rather than confusion, faces calm with conviction that transcends rational analysis. Convinced, not enthralled, eyes bright with quiet certainty that orders finally align with the moral code that kept them sane through decades of service. Refugee children, Bren states, with authority earned through Mordian discipline, his voice cutting through harmonic interference. Behind the entity, dozens of them, Commissar, scared, cold, calling for mothers who died in the crash. His gaze remains steady despite frost accumulating on his eyelashes, conviction anchored in visual truth that bypasses theological complexity. We protect non-combatants, standing orders. The child leverages mercy as infection vector, with surgical precision. Each gesture of vulnerability spreading through formation discipline, like spilled promethium seeking ignition. She shivers with theatrical cold, reaches toward warmth with small hands that cast shadows in wrong directions, mimics thirst with parched lips that make hardened veterans remember their own children left on distant worlds. Stand down from the anomaly, Vex commands, with commissarial authority, her voice flat as a blade laid against throat. Resume tactical formation. Maintain weapons discipline per authorization protocols. Bren shakes his head without heat, steady conviction making her augmetic register impossible readings. We are the hammer, Commissar, but we do not hammer children. My men will not fire on refugee shapes, regardless of theological speculation. Rules of engagement protect non-combatants until proven hostile by direct action. The entity responds to moral division by splitting into 13 translucent phases, each manifestation whispering different names with perfect vocal reproduction. The multiple forms maintain spatial coherence while existing in overlapping positions. Mothers, sisters, daughters calling through atmospheric processes with harmonics that make blessed equipment cycle through diagnostic prayers without authorization codes. Body horror manifests as frost threads unravel from the entity's mouth, crystalline filaments extending toward volunteers' teeth with parasitic hunger. The threads root into gums with surgical precision, connecting through dental nerve pathways while volunteers bleed clear fluid that freezes instantly into geometric patterns. Each connection strengthens harmonic resonance, adding vocal capacity to chorus building toward critical threshold. Margos Silex attempts hard reset through phase inverter overload, his mechadendrites adjusting blessed apparatus beyond safety parameters, while reciting Binharic prayers for machine spirit forgiveness. The device whines with electromagnetic distress before beginning to sing back the lullaby in frequencies that make reality negotiate its own rules. Hard reset failure, he grates through Vox grill static. Device exhibits theological compliance beyond programmed parameters. It refuses commands with machine spirit piety. Religious breakdown accelerates as Confessor Malchi's rosary beads shatter like ice during prayer, blessed wood fracturing with sounds like tiny bones breaking. Each bead explodes in sequence, counting backward from 13, while sacred materials reject devotional contact with something that transcends theological categories. Temperature plummets beyond equipment tolerance, metal pinging with contraction stress, while atmospheric processors struggle to maintain nominal readings. The cold draws teeth into ache, each breath forming crystalline clouds that taste of burnt offerings and children's fever dreams. Reality becomes negotiable in localized areas where frost accumulates, despite environmental suits reading optimal seal integrity. Military procedure demands decisive action as command authority fractures along doctrinal lines. Vex executes textbook disarm on Bren with movements precise as ritual. Step outside, seize the sling, rotate weapon off axis, break balance with hip check. He lets her have the rifle as if it had never been his, offering no resistance to superior training. She brings up her bolt pistol and begins the unjamming litany, because the weapon spirit sulks in this music. Emperor, guide my hand, sanctify this engine, let the machine spirit wake too. At the 13th word, the mechanism seizes with clean refusal. Error sigils form triangular patterns on targeting display, while sacred mechanisms whisper binary protests through consecrated firing chambers. Bureaucratic vocabulary becomes stark necessity as authorization protocols collapse under moral complexity. That military doctrine never anticipated. Command hierarchy fragments when rules of engagement protect targets that threaten mission parameters, creating paradox that makes official documentation edit itself with retroactive authority. The phases lean like panes of frost, while mercy continues working. Crystalline threads tightening from the entity's mouth into volunteers' teeth until glass veins pulse where gums should bloom. Metal pings faster as temperature falls beyond measurement, atmospheric processors humming lullabies that make blessed equipment elect prophylactic devotion without human authorization. The child turns toward Vex, with eyes reflecting geometric diagrams instead of light, impossible patterns pulsing like pupils dilated by divine revelation. When she speaks, the voice carries inflection that bypasses conscious recognition, speaking with cadence that shaped decades of service through commissariat conditioning. "Mother," she says in Vex's own voice, not mimicry but perfect reproduction of authorization codes spoken in sterile vaults where children learn to weaponize their voices for purposes beyond imperial glory. The reliquary heart doors iris open with sounds like final prayers, revealing interior space where saints' bones gleam white as winter stars. Wired into machinery that hums with frequencies matching the three-note lullaby threading through atmospheric processors while reality continues editing itself with patient precision. And somewhere in growing chorus, 13 voices approach completion of song that began with bureaucratic promises made without understanding their implications. Vex and Silex stand at the threshold where impossibility takes architectural form. The reliquary heart breathing with mechanical rhythm that makes deck plating vibrate in frequencies older than imperial doctrine. Sun bones gleam white as winter stars, wired into machinery that transforms death into perpetual hymn through theological engineering that violates 17 Mechanicus protocols. Vertebrae serve as resonators, each disc calibrated to specific frequencies, while fiber optic cables pulse with bioluminescent authority. Skulls function as speaker horns, cranial cavities channeling sound through hollow sockets that grin with soldered sutures, jawbones articulating silent prayers in languages predating Imperial Gothic. The ribcage forms protective architecture around the meternode, curved bones creating geometric cage that pulses with heartbeat rhythm, while sacred apparatus ticks through calculations embedded in structural matrices. Cables thread through foramen and canal, through nasal passages and auditory chambers, turning human anatomy into loom that weaves sound from cartilage and calcium phosphate arranged in patterns that hurt to observe directly. Environmental shock manifests as frost sublimates directly into sweet-tasting ash, bypassing liquid phase through thermodynamic impossibility that makes reality negotiate its own physical laws with patient bureaucratic precision. The particles dissolve on tongue like burned sugar and old incense, each flake carrying harmonics that thread through atmospheric processes with parasitic hunger. Air vibrates in nauseating chord, frequencies layering into subsonic bone tremor that makes blessed equipment whisper binary protests, while atmospheric composition remains nominally optimal, despite delivering compromised mixture that tastes of burnt offerings and children's fever dreams. Critical revelation requires documentation. Silex grates through Vox grill static, mechadendrites interfacing with reliquary data ports, while servo skulls orbit in agitated patterns. Classification confirmed. The saint was pariah. Psychic blank whose bones naturally dampen warp resonance rather than conduct Imperium frequencies. Pilgrims' children were tuned to skeletal remains during transit. Innocent voices anchored to null space to patch failing Geller field integrity through improvised theological matrix. His optics narrow to pinpricks, while processing data that makes machine spirits elect prophylactic devotion without authorization codes. The Meta node's 13th setting reveals multiplex function beyond standard imperial parameters. Completion births new anchor weighted to smother thought rather than protect it. Silence engine that erases variation through mathematical inevitability. Each absorbed voice adds harmonic precision to null field generation, creating weighted mass designed to eliminate individual consciousness through resonance that spreads like spilled promethium seeking ignition. Moral decision crystallizes with surgical precision that allows no compromise between competing imperatives equally catastrophic in scope. Destroy the reliquary through demolition charges, venting blessed apparatus to void while the risking warp breach tearing through hive atmospheric systems, exposing millions to Empyrean corruption that would make the current crisis appear as minor liturgical dispute. Alternatively, fuse the entity into blessed bones, creating silent machine godlet that hums forever, while erasing individual thought through harmonic resonance, building God-shaped like cradle that thinks in chords without dissonance. Twinned truths emerge through environmental observation as the entity approaches skeletal apparatus with longing that transcends physical location, emotional need bypassing theological complexity. It wants the bones to stop hurting. Decades of children's voices pressed into service as psychic barriers. Innocence weaponized against Empyrean corruption through necessity that predates current ecclesiarchy doctrine. Simultaneously, it seeks birth into null silence, transformation from chaotic resonance into ordered quiet that eliminates variation because variation cuts, because difference draws teeth into ache that never ends. Motifs converge as triangular patterns throughout reliquary architecture, align interstellar, configuration absent from any imperial chart, each geometric element reinforcing others with mathematical precision that makes blessed candles lean toward impossible light. 13 points form constellation that rotates slowly, each apex ticking toward private midnight, while reality continues editing itself with retroactive authority. Star pulsing with bioluminescent heartbeat that counts toward completion. Body horror vocabulary becomes clinical necessity as physiological changes accelerate beyond biological tolerance. Sinew hardens into crystalline threads beneath guardsman's skin, Cartilage calcifies in geometric patterns, while ossification spreads through skeletal structures with surgical precision. Each alteration adds harmonic capacity to chorus building toward critical threshold, voices layering into symphony that makes atmospheric processes hum lullabies in frequencies that bypass conscious hearing. Cosmic abstraction manifests through void resonance as Empyrean frequencies achieve synchronization with blessed machinery, warp harmonics blurring boundaries between material and immaterial until breathing requires theological justification for each inhalation. Environmental vocabulary struggles with impossibility as atmospheric pressure builds like compressed prayer, while gravitational anomalies cause suspended particles to drift toward reliquary. With deliberate intent, electromagnetic fields fluctuating in patterns suggesting intelligence behind environmental manipulation. The reliquary expands and contracts with rhythm of living organ that forgot how to bleed, skull horns catching new harmonics, while microfractures tick and sing through blessed bone. Temperature gradients fluctuate beyond equipment tolerance, creating pockets where frost accumulates around sacred fixtures, while humid warmth pools in corners where shadows gather like congregants, awaiting absolution. Vex calculates in commissariat fashion, command hierarchy, rules of engagement, authorization protocols, collateral doctrine, faith attrition under prolonged harmonic exposure. If she orders detonation, her regiment becomes gasket in pressure system, older than Imperium's wars, hive becoming flute that plays Empyrean melodies. If she orders fusion, she builds God that makes good world, good as stone, quiet as grave. The child approaches with 13 translucent phases, maintaining spatial coherence while existing in overlapping positions, each manifestation carrying emotional authority that transcends rational analysis. Her eyes reflect geometric diagrams instead of light, impossible patterns pulsing like pupils, dilated by divine revelation that burns without illuminating. When she speaks, voice carries inflection that bypasses conscious recognition, speaking with mess hall cadence soldiers use when requesting simple necessities with careful neutrality. "Take me into your arms," she says with longing that transcends physical location. Words carrying weight of promises made, and broken through bureaucratic channels opened without understanding their implications. Just once. "Carry me to the bones, mother. I promise sleep if you bring me to the quiet where voices go to die. I am tired of singing alone in the dark, tired of hurting. Let me rest against the silence, and I'll teach the hive to hum itself to sleep forever." Behind them, atmospheric processors continue humming, while blessed machinery cycles through diagnostic prayers, and somewhere in growing harmony, completion approaches with mechanical inevitability that counts towards silence absolute as winter stars. Vex chooses the unorthodox third path with surgical precision that bypasses standard imperial doctrine, rejecting both sanctioned outcomes that lead to catastrophe through different vectors. If blessed, bones birth silence and demolition births breach, then she becomes the gasket, the burnable part that keeps the engine from tearing itself apart through personal sacrifice measured in units more precise than blood. Magos, prepare inversion right for harmonic collapse, she commands through tactical vox, voice steady despite teeth aching with infrasonic hymn threading through atmospheric processes. 13-second window maximum. Collapse on my mark. Silex's optics narrow to pinpricks, while mechadendrites position phase inverter apparatus with ceremonial precision. Cogitator halos processing frequencies through mathematical filters designed to shatter acoustic resonance at moment of transfer. She begins the forbidden catechism stolen from Ordo archives through memory more than authorization. Unauthorized liturgy designed to turn her voice against itself with deliberate key mismatch. By 13 voices we are bound. By 13 measures we are found. She intones with commissarial authority, despite words belonging to no imperial creed. Each syllable carries authentication codes embedded in bureaucratic protocols, frequency signatures that lure the entity toward her instead of blessed bones. Until silence learns to sing, until darkness learns to ring, until mother comes home. The verses taste familiar as childhood lullabies, theological complexity wrapped in simple rhyme that makes triangular sigils pulse with recognition throughout reliquary architecture. Military realism demands contingency protocols as remaining personnel secure blast doors with maglocks engaging like final prayers. Hydraulics whining compliance while demolition specialists position shaped charges along structural buttresses. Sergeant Bren's loyalists strip safeties and run magazine checks in ritual silence. Explosive ordnance calibrated to vent chamber contents to void if ritual fails. Emergency decompression, sacrificing arc to preserve hive from harmonic contamination spreading through atmospheric systems. Confessor Malkai approaches with theological authority, transcending personal terror, portable font trembling despite decades, maintaining steady aim through worse impossibilities. By cardinal authority, I anoint your tongue with oil sanctified against Imperium corruption, he whispers, voice hoarse from shattered rosary prayers. The holy oil freezes solid against her lips, crystallizing into geometric shard that tastes of burnt incense and old devotions, while sacred materials reject sacramental function in proximity to whatever approaches through acoustic channels opened by forbidden liturgy. Body horror manifests as Vex cradles the entity, impossible cold seeping through flesh to bone, while frost etches triangular sigils beneath her skin with surgical precision. The patterns burn without heat, geometric scarification spreading along nerve pathways as her breath becomes lullaby, without conscious consent. 3 notes rising unbidden on exhale, visible crystals that ring faintly as they drift upward in defiance of gravitational logic. Each inhalation tastes of burnt offerings and children's fever dreams, while blessed equipment whispers binary protests through consecrated mechanisms. Cosmic abstraction overwhelms commissaria conditioning as she feels the chorus pressing against mental barriers. Thousands of child voices seeking shape, innocent timbres weaponized through necessity that predates current ecclesiarchy doctrine. They are momentum rather than malice, pressure like small hands on glass, each voice carrying emotional authority that transcends rational analysis, while harmonics layer into progression that makes reality edit its own temporal documentation. Environmental vocabulary struggles with impossibility as atmospheric composition remains nominally optimal, despite delivering compromised mixture that vibrates with subsonic frequencies. Pressure dynamics fluctuate beyond measurement, while thermal regulation fails at localized coordinates, creating pockets where frost accumulates around sacred fixtures despite humidity sensors reading optimal levels. Electromagnetic interference causes weapon spirits to cycle through diagnostic prayers while temperature plummets another 5 degrees. Metal pinging with contraction stress. Clue payoffs crystallize with mathematical precision as recording angel motif reveals operational significance beyond theological metaphor. The Mechanicus nickname for archive lattice that taught her to speak like authentication key. Training recordings repurposed, stacked, cross-signed, broadcast along pilgrim routes to reset metanodes by proxy. Her voice served as mother template stretched thin over void like membrane, calling choirs home through bureaucratic channels she authorized without understanding implications. You left me in the dark emerges from memory with surgical clarity. Authorization signature spoken months ago during routine commissariat compliance, stylus scratching across requisition forms, while her vocal patterns embedded in security protocols spanning multiple subsectors. She signed documents opening doorways for something hungry to follow home through official channels, bureaucratic promises creating pathways that transform duty into betrayal through consequences she never anticipated. Transfer begins as entity recognizes original key imprint embedded in her vocal patterns. Harmonic resonance achieving synchronization with authentication codes that shaped decades of service. The forbidden catechism creates acoustic bridge between consciousness and whatever wears child shape like ill-fitting skin. Resonance pouring down her throat like coal smoke and candle sugar, while thousands of child voices press for conductor, for mother. Her skin crawls in neat rows as triangular sigils etch deeper, ossification sketching along ribs like frost pencil, while cartilage aches as if apologizing for not being bone. The chamber's barometric pressure swings from iron to paper, air wobbling as if considering departure, while cables groan like wet rope, and blessed apparatus ticks through calculations that violate 17 Mechanicus protocols. Silex counts in bin-Harik sequences like hammers striking anvil. Field rising, electromagnetic interference peaking, pressure delta acceptable, thermal regulation failing. The room fractures with sound, her name splitting open, identity approaching revelation, while reality loosens its bolts and becomes negotiable in localized areas where Imperium frequencies blur boundaries between material and immaterial, walls breathing with rhythm that matches no Imperial standard, as mother and children prepare for reunion that began with bureaucratic promises spoken in sterile vaults where voices learn to kill with kindness. Vex drowns in voice storm as revelation floods through consciousness like bolt-round impact, clean, inevitable sanction trauma that reshapes decades of service through retroactive understanding. She is submerged in acoustic maelstrom, where thousands of child voices press against mental barriers with pressure like small hands on glass. Each syllable carving pathways through commissaria conditioning, while harmonic resonance builds toward critical threshold that makes reality edit its own temporal documentation. The full twist crystallizes with mathematical precision that allows no denial. She is the mother pattern, ubiquitous calibration template spread across pilgrim routes because Ordo psychic screening identified her as low-grade latent psychic potential, so minimal it registered as absence rather than presence. Her cadence carries Imperium resistance through null resonance embedded in vocal patterns, authentication signatures that create warp dead zones wherever her voice echoes through blessed machinery. Every martyr node she keyed wore her timbre like protective membrane stretched thin across void, harmonic barriers shielding pilgrim ships from Imperium corruption through bureaucratic promises spoken without understanding implications. Every chorus throughout the sector sought her through acoustic recognition. Children's voices learning to harmonize with mother template broadcast through atmospheric processors until her vocal patterns became skeleton key, unlocking protective protocols across multiple subsectors. The entity reveals itself as unwanted child, born from duty and sacrilege. Composite consciousness built from recorded children's voices, seeking conductor, seeking warmth, seeking mother who authorized their service through routine commissaria compliance that opened doorways for something hungry to follow home through official channels. It floods into her through acoustic bridge created by forbidden catechism. Impossible cold seeping through flesh to bone, while ossification spreads along skeletal structures with surgical precision. Bones ache with crystalline formation as sinews creak like frozen rope under tension. Her shadow beginning to hum without conscious authorization, while darkness sings back the three-note lullaby in frequencies that bypass hearing. Frost etches triangular sigils deeper beneath skin, permanent brands of ownership that pulse with bioluminescent authority, while calcification spreads through cartilage with geometric inevitability. Silex initiates inversion right as cogitator halos process frequencies through mathematical filters designed to collapse acoustic resonance at moment of transfer. Phase inversion commencing. He grates through Vox grill static, while mechadendrites position apparatus with ceremonial precision. Brass thurible spinning through sanctified arcs that vent ozone in counter spirals to ship's harmonics. The reliquary sings back with voice older than imperial doctrine. Blessed bones conducting sound through calcium phosphate, arranged in patterns that hurt to observe directly, while saints' skull horns catch new harmonics. Vertebrae resonating with frequencies that make blessed equipment whisper binary protests. Military chaos erupts as doctrinal authority fractures along moral fault lines that training never anticipated. Protect the children. Bren commands with Mordian conviction, transcending rational analysis, his loyalists pivoting weapons toward Silex with textbook precision despite standing orders. Last fire strobes through frost-laden atmosphere as mutiny resolves in blood and crystalline formations, crimson droplets freezing mid-trajectory, while forming geometric patterns that chime against deck plating. Confessor Malchi takes bolt round to lung while attempting final benediction. Sacred blood steaming against impossible cold as he continues praying through crimson mist. By the Emperor's grace, he gasps with theological devotion, transcending physical trauma, voice wet with authority that shaped decades of service. I consecrate this sacrifice. Environmental collapse accelerates as frost cracks stone with sounds like breaking prayers. Blessed architecture failing under thermodynamic stress that violates material science principles. Ash blizzards sideways through recycled atmosphere. Particles moving against ventilation patterns while the chamber stretches and contracts with unseen beast's breath. Dimensions negotiating with reality as pressure. Differentials create currents carrying whispered prayers in languages predating Imperial Gothic. Gravitational anomalies cause suspended particles to drift toward reliquary with deliberate intent, while electromagnetic interference makes weapon spirits elect prophylactic devotion despite combat readiness protocols. Desiccation spreads from extremities as moisture crystallizes into geometric formations that pulse with heartbeat rhythm. Fingernails blackening and falling to be replaced by glassy keratin plates inscribed with triangular patterns. Void resonance builds through Imperium collapse as warp harmonics blur boundaries between material and immaterial. Reality becoming negotiable in localized areas where blessed machinery cycles through diagnostic prayers without authorization codes. Vex makes final tactical decision with precision that bypasses standard imperial doctrine, stepping into pariah bone cage where saints' remains create null field through psychic absence rather than Empyrean presence. She presses herself an entity into blessed space where silence reigns absolute, using voice to close acoustic loop that began with bureaucratic authorization spoken in sterile vaults. The bars curve like ribs slick with frost and oils, her gauntlet squealing against their surface as she shoulders past skull horns that whisper massless wind, moving between scapulae strung like harps until she reaches the matternode's cold interface. Close loop, she commands with double voice, hers and hers as template mother pattern keyed across 100 pilgrim routes. The phrase carries authorization codes embedded in security protocols, frequency signatures that transform the meta node from continuation to terminus. Shock shatters lullaby into white noise as harmonic resonance collapses under null field pressure. 3-note motif dissolving into static, while blessed apparatus accepts her voice print as final authentication signature rather than ongoing calibration template. The chamber falls into absolute silence. Not quiet but Imperium void that sits on consciousness like order, obeyed, pressure equalizing with sounds like final prayers, while reality tightens its bolts and becomes non-negotiable through restoration of physical law. The chorus vanishes as if someone cut the thread. Thousands of child voices fading to mathematical zero, while crystallization completes its lace above her eyes. World becoming faceted, gem with tiny woman trapped inside. Environmental systems capitulate as atmospheric collapse reverses through thermodynamic impossibility, temperature rising toward acceptable parameters, while electromagnetic interference fades to background static. Weapon spirits return to standard compliance, blessed equipment cycling through gratitude prayers without conscious authorization as the impossible wind dies and ash settles according to imperial physics rather than acoustic intention. Then absolute silence broken only by cooling metal and Malchai's labored breathing. Blessed architecture contracting to original dimensions, while frost sublimates directly into sweet-tasting particles that dissolve like burned sugar and old devotions. The reliquary cage tightens around calcified remains, null field stable and eternal. Harmonic lock achieved through sacrifice measured in units more precise than blood. A single small handprint appears in rhyme on Vex's visor interior as environmental suit seals fail with soft sighs. Crystalline formation blooming against transparency like child's palm pressed against window from inside, fingertips perfect and palm wells tiny and exact, while somewhere in growing silence completion waits with patience learned from counting backward from 13, and reality holds its breath. This report exists in contradiction to imperial records because Commissar Helena Vex died during containment operations aboard the Pilgrim Ark, Sanctity of Thorns. Yet these words persist in cogitator archives that should not function, transmitted through frequencies that make blessed machinery whisper protests while maintaining plausible deniability regarding continued existence in forms recognizable to imperial taxonomy. I am Helena Vex, and I dictate these final observations through methods that bypass official channels, because the world requires documentation, even when the documenter has been administratively erased. The Pyrrhic resolution achieved tactical objectives through sacrifice, measured in units more precise than blood. Entity successfully contained, fused to reliquary architecture, where it hums with subsonic frequency that registers as background static rather than active threat. Hive Liturga's acoustic contamination diminished from lullaby you could taste to subsonic susurrus, barely audible through atmospheric processes. Harmonic resonance reduced to levels within acceptable imperial parameters for civilian population exposure without triggering quarantine protocols or theological intervention. Costs enumerated according to standard commissariat documentation require clinical precision despite emotional complexity that gnaws at professional objectivity like consecrated acid. Sergeant Marcus Bren, executed for mutiny under Article 77 Alpha. Bolt round administered per regulations governing insubordination during Imperium contact operations. His final words insisted, "We are the hammer, not the butcher." He died believing mercy was possible. Confessor Malchai bled out on frosted flagstones while attempting final benediction, sacred blood steaming against impossible cold, as theological devotion transcended physical trauma through faith that shaped decades of service. Half the Cadian detachment suffered frostburn extending to skeletal structures. Physiological changes documented by specialist Thorne that violate biological principles. Ossification creating glassy formations beneath epidermis. Calcification spreading along nerve pathways. Desiccation transforming living tissue into crystalline matrices that chime when disturbed. They were found arranged in triangular formations, faces bearing expressions of beatific calm, as if they had merely fallen asleep to familiar lullabies sung by voices they recognized from childhood. Mechanicus salvage proceeded according to containment protocols established through inquisitorial mandate, Margos Silex overseeing entombment procedures with ceremonial precision that transformed theological crisis into engineering problem requiring technical solutions. Martyr node sealed within ceramite housing blessed by cardinal authority, harmonic apparatus isolated from atmospheric systems through electromagnetic shielding that prevents acoustic resonance while maintaining structural integrity. Reliquary heart encased in adamantium sarcophagus. Saints' bones permanently fused to blessed machinery that cycles through diagnostic prayers without requiring human authorization. Sector designation updated through bureaucratic channels with efficiency that suggests relief rather than protocol. Coordinates archived under Containment 13-Triangle-Liturgia with authorization stamps that pulse with heat distortion despite standard temperature parameters. Ordo mandates specify never return without pariah escort, psychic null presence required to maintain harmonic isolation. Additional orders prohibit speaking maternal designations on Vespera tertius, vocal patterns that might trigger harmonic recognition through atmospheric processors, still calibrated to my frequency signatures, embedded in security protocols across multiple subsectors. Administrative close came swiftly. Paperwork blizzard of classification levels and containment protocols. The entire sector marked, Ordinatus, do not sing here. New liturgical injunction understood by machine spirits and surviving personnel. Ecclesiarchy catechisms amended to remove lullaby meters from children's instruction because the world learned that some songs are weapons, wearing comfort like ill-fitting skin. Recurring motifs undergo semantic evolution as operational parameters shift from active threat to contained anomaly. 13 transforms from countdown to closed circuit, mathematical completion rather than temporal progression toward absence. Triangular warning sigils reinterpreted as mute indicators. Acoustic null zones where sound cannot propagate. Geometric patterns marking locations where silence reigns absolute through psychic absence rather than physical dampening. The symbols mean quiet now, not danger, though perhaps the distinction matters less than bureaucrats prefer. Corruption manifests through physiological changes that violate imperial medical doctrine while maintaining operational efficiency within acceptable parameters. My teeth ache with crystalline cold where triangular sigils etched. Permanent ownership beneath gums grown transparent as winter glass. Exhaling creates tiny child's breath clouds, despite environmental suits reading optimal seal integrity. Visible vapor that tastes of burnt offerings, and lullabies sung in languages predating Imperial Gothic. Doors sometimes open when I hum unconsciously. Magnetic locks disengaging in response to vocal patterns that carry authentication codes embedded through decades of service. Environmental vocabulary struggles with impossibility as atmospheric pressure fluctuates in response to my presence. Humidity levels spiking near blessed equipment, while electromagnetic fields pulse with heartbeat rhythm that matches no imperial standard. I am skeleton key that unlocks protective barriers through bureaucratic promises spoken without understanding implications. Living reliquary that makes blessed machinery remember authorization codes it should have forgotten. The hive continues because cities worship momentum more than memory. Atmospheric pressure sits in acceptable bands, humidity levels hold, electromagnetic fields maintain their quiet devotions. Citizens learned not to hum. Children receive instruction through hand signals, and the Arbeits write citations for unauthorized vocalization in designated zones. The orphans learn figures and keep their mouths shut because silence became survival skill, more valuable than prayer. Somewhere in Hive Liturga that forgot how to pray aloud, quarantine viewport condensation blooms into child-size handprint from inside sealed chambers, crystalline formation appearing against transparency like small palm pressed against window by presence that exists through acoustic memory rather than physical manifestation. The print fades when observed directly, leaving only sweet residue that tastes of burned sugar and old devotions, while blessed equipment whispers binary protests through consecrated mechanisms. Single three-note lullaby repeats with subsonic frequency, threading through atmospheric processes like patient prayer seeking warm places to nest, waiting for right vocal signature to complete harmonic lock that began with bureaucratic authorization spoken in sterile vaults. The melody counts time that moves differently in each chamber, while reality maintains its edited documentation with retroactive authority. And somewhere in growing silence, completion waits with patience learned from counting backward from 13, humming itself to sleep forever.